Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Spiritual Times with me, Philip Solomon. I have to say, it's a great pleasure, and I'm very, very grateful to you for in some numbers really now, that you're joining with me every Thursday night to talk about different areas of the paranormal, spiritual world, things of that nature. But tonight we're going to talk about a subject that I think is very interesting. It's all to do with psychic pets. Do you believe that your pets are psychic? Do you believe that animals are psychic? That they can, sort of pick up on things and be aware of otherworldliness? Well, yeah, psychic pets, it refers, doesn't it, I suppose, to animals being believed to have extrasensory perception almost, I suppose, doesn't it? ASP, or certainly intuitive abilities that go beyond normal animal behaviour and their instincts, because they do certainly have these very special instincts and the ways to tune into things, don't they? I don't think that could be doubted in any way. I mean, some years ago, we used to have a German Shepherd dog. Lovely girl she was, very sensitive, very, very clever. She was half German Shepherd and half Belgian Blue. Jet black, jet black dog. Very much like a German Shepherd, really, to look at. But she was incredibly intelligent. And my wife used to always say that that dog knew when I was about an hour away or half an hour away from home, and she'd start rushing to the door and pointing at the door to my wife to be ready to let me in, or that I was coming into the house. And people say, well, she knew the times that you were coming at. But that couldn't have been so, because in my job at that time, I used to return home at all different times. And my wife, Kath, would say that, well, it don't make no difference. She would know when you were on your way out, nearly on your way home, and she wouldn't rest until you come through the door. Extrasensory perception? A coincidence? I don't know. I think you've got to look at things, sort of sensibly and consider all the possibilities. People who believe their pets are psychic often share their stories of animals that seem to suggest that they sense emotions. Pets may offer comfort or change their behaviour when their owners are sad, anxious, or ill, which believers interpret as empathy on the part of your pet or an ability to read the energy field around you. Well, again, I have to say now the dog that we've got now is incredibly like that, really. If you're not very well, he doesn't like it. He'll insist on, coming and fussing you and trying to see if he could make you better and things like that. I mentioned anticipating events the way our former dog used to do. Owners record or report pets returning to their homes months before they arrive or hiding before a major life change like a move or a new baby. I've been told that by a lot of people, the dogs seem to be either excited that a new child is coming into the family or sort of not themselves, maybe. Maybe they think that they're going to be, having their nose pushed out, and anticipating events like the experience that I told. It's not just me who reports things like that. It's a factual thing, really. Lots of people have told me about having experiences like that with their dogs and other animals. Communicate telepathically, can they? Some owners certainly believe they can exchange thoughts and feelings with their pets mind to mind. Now, I've got some friends, particularly one, Elizabeth Beth Crowther, who's an animal communicator, and she absolutely believes in that. And she's had some remarkable events with her experiences of doing that and doing it live on television and things like that. Hmm. Sense the paranormal. Stories includes pets reacting to ghosts or sensing danger before it is apparent to humans. Now, I've got an interesting story that I can tell you about that. When I was a young boy, I lived in a very, very large house, probably one of the biggest houses in the town that I was living in at that time. And it was a spooky old place, really. It was one of those sort of houses that got large gardens and stables at the bottom of the gardens and big, sort of big, great big spacious rooms. And my mum was often in and out of hospital. She wasn't very well, She has to spend time in hospital. And as I've probably told you before, my dad was a dancehall promoter. So he would be away, and sometimes I'd have to stop in that house to the very early hours when he came home on my own. But I had a dog at that time. I had a dog. I can remember him so very well, Bronco. And I used to see and sense ghosts in that house, but he did too. He did too. And I'll tell you one experience that I had. There were noises and bangs and sort of things going on outside the door of the room that we were in. And he shot to that door and sat in front of it, and he wouldn't let me go out to look what it was. I probably didn't want to be quite honest, but he wasn't going to let me. And on another occasion, if I'll tell you this, you can't go and investigate this house because it don't stand anymore. But another time, I don't know, I heard something out by the door. There's a massive great alleyway and not alleyway, hallway, I should say, and stairs that led up to the buildings. And I heard something, sort of footsteps. And I wasn't that alarmed. I wasn't that scared, but I sort of opened the door and went out there, and Bronco, my dog, came with me. And honestly, I saw before me a gentleman that had to be of another time. Wasn't of the eras and years that we were living at that time. I should say maybe from around about 1860, 1870, something like that. Very dark clothing, top hat, a cane, carrying the cane. And the strange thing is, he seemed to look at me. Now, many reports we have of ghosts, they're not aware of you really, and that it's the same thing that happens over and over again, isn't it? You see the ghost walk along the places that appear, but not so much communicating with you. Of course, they would if they were spirits, or could if they were spirits, I should say. But this gentleman looked at me and sort of looked again and sort of was blinking, and I think that he could see me. I could see him and he could see me. But I can only say that my dog beside me, literally, the hair on his coat stood on end. He looked at him very intently, and his fur literally stood on end, and he started to growl. Well, I don't know what the experience was of the man, if it was a time slip, but he went through the door, shut it behind him, and that was the end of the story. And I said, "You okay, Bronco? What was that, son? And your little boy, maybe about, I don't know, about 8 or 9. And it was a frightening experience, but he'd certainly sensed something as well. And yet I always felt safe with him, Bronco. As I've said, Mum spent a lot of time in hospital, and she was at one of the hospitals in Wolverhampton, the Women's Hospital, which had the big park opposite if you come from Wolverhampton and you remember that hospital had a women's hospital. And Dad used to go in to see her, but they didn't allow children. But what I used to do, I'd go and walk around the park and for a couple of hours, and Dad would come and get me and we'd go home. But on one occasion, this man kept looking at me, only a little lad, and he started walking over towards us, not as if he were going to do anything, but towards me. And Bronco immediately turned his head to him and started to growl and bark. And the man said to me, "Oh, you want to loose that dog? He's being silly. I've got something for you. I want to show you something." He got furious. Bronco got furious. And thank God that I listened to him, really, because thinking back, I don't think his intentions were probably very good to me. And that might have been at the end of my life, or maybe something awful might have happened to me. But we had a very special relationship, me and that dog. Unfortunately, when Mum came out of hospital, she'd had big operations, and I was told that Bronco would be sold. It broke my heart, but she was concerned that he might have jumped up her or something, and she'd had a lot of stitches and things like that. He wouldn't, he wouldn't. But sometimes if he was correcting me about things, he'd make it obvious he didn't like her doing it. So that probably weren't too good either. And Mum used to breed dogs. She was a dog breeder at that time. And as far as I know, someone had heard about my dog and very well. I trained him really, really well. Very, very intelligent. And I was called into the front room to go and fetch Bronco. I fetched him. And Mum says, this dog, Bronco now is going with this gentleman. So you better say to him. And I didn't cry. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. And Mum told me, tell him to go with this gentleman. And the gentleman, he went, when I told him to do it, he did it. And yeah, and the gentleman says, you'll be able to come and see him again in the future if you want to. And I said I would like that, but I never did. I never saw Bronco again. End of story. But we had a very special connection, me and that dog. He communicated with me to keep me safe, to look after me, much more than just the sort of what you would call a guard dog. I didn't talk to him. Well, I did. I did just have chat to him. You do talk to your dogs, don't you? And you spend a lot of time on your own. You do, don't you? But he was incredibly intelligent. He was, and certainly protected me both from this world and maybe something from the next. As I say, when that man at the front of the door, I was very scared, very, very scared, close to pooping myself. But Bronco looked after me. So a special relationship there. Look at it from the scientific perspective, and we must do that, mustn't we, if we're going to think. If we're going to say we're looking into whether psychic pets are real, whether animal communications are, we must look at both sides. And the scientific perspective, I should say. From a scientific standpoint, these behaviours, experts say, can be explained by an animal's remarkable natural abilities. Well, that's possible. They certainly have heightened senses, very heightened senses of things, don't they? Animals, especially dogs and cats, have far more acute senses of smell and hearing than humans. Now we know that to be we know that to be a scientific fact. Yeah, they can detect subtle changes, scent, hormonal shifts related to mood or illnesses, sound, a familiar car engine from a distance, vibrations to natural disasters that humans miss. Well, but I'm reading here the scientific perspectives, but I don't know whether they really give an answer to what we're looking at really. Observational skills. Pets are highly attuned to their owners' routines, body language specifically. And I suppose we have to accept that if you act differently or something reacts, maybe that's the trigger that gets those dogs into, or your cats, of course. Cats have lots of stories as well. I remember quite some while ago now, I used to, well, I've wrote for many famous newspapers and magazines over my years working as a professional medium and writer. And I think it was Fate and Fortune I was working for at the time. But there used to be a lady on there who got a horse, Texas the horse. And Texas, now don't be taking this funny, but Texas was almost considered the psychic agony uncle for that magazine. Now, I used to have that job for the Wolverhampton Express and Star, biggest regional newspaper in the country. That might surprise you, but it was. But Fate and Fortune, a pretty big magazine. And this lady with Texas the talking horse used to answer all sorts of different things of what people problems they'd got, what advice they could give, and throw the lady who owned him, of course. But she absolutely was, well, quite adamant that he answered the questions that were being sent in. Well, talking a little bit about pet psychics and animal communicators. A big market has emerged around these beliefs, with individuals calling themselves pet psychics or animal communicators. I've got a couple of very good friends of mine, and I'll tell you about that as we go through. We will call it a workshop or a TV show or whatever you want to call it. We simply call it Spiritual Times with Philip Solomon, and I chat and I help entertain you. But yeah, there's quite a big market that's there now with individuals calling themselves animal communicators, offering through paid services or voluntary, some of them, to translate your pet's thoughts and their feelings to you. They claim to use telepathy and energy-based connections to gain insights into an animal's emotional states, behavioural issues, or physical discomfort. While many pet owners find emotional value and comfort in these sessions, especially when they're grieving as well for a lost pet, and there's another one comes not to take the place but to be with you, and you're seeking to strengthen their bonds. Skeptics view these services just either a result of the practitioner using, I have to say, cold reading techniques. We've all heard of those where, I mean, you say that with some mediums, don't you? They give very general messages, really, that I suppose, in all honesty, could apply to anybody. But when I was working as a medium, I never did that. If I always used to say to the people that I taught, in mediumistic work. If you can get a person's name or describe them, you should be able to give the full name. You should be able to give very specific information. That's the job. And you can't go to somebody, if you go to a message, give somebody a message in spiritual church or sometimes say, I'm going to come to you, Harry. Finish that one. Okay, I'm going to come to you, Pearl. That was a red flags, isn't they? You obviously they know the person, don't they? But we're not talking about that tonight, so we'll leave that to one side. Well, I don't know. Maybe some of the animal communicators do use a sort of form of cold reading techniques to simply, you know, pick up on the animal's behavior or the person that they're working for. But I remember once my friend, who I'll talk to you about in a minute, Psychic Beth, on TV, she'd gone to this place where they were sort of an animal sanctuary, I think, and they'd got a fox there, and she was communicating with the fox, and the fox told apparently told Beth that he was very unhappy because he'd lost his friend and he was missing him. And I have to tell you, I think the guy who run this particular place wasn't very believing in all sorts of things, psychic and spiritual, paranormal. Not at all. Maybe his partner and the people who were there might have done, but he didn't. But he was shocked because those people turned around and said, well, this is true, Beth. He did lose his friend and he has been mopey ever since. But, can you tell him that he's gone to a better place? And, I know this sounds silly, but he'll see him again one day and they'll be friends again. And apparently the fox immediately seemed to be happier and more contented. And checking back, apparently that was the case. He had been missing his little friend who had passed away. It's, I mean, I'm sure there's scientific answers that you could throw at me and say, well, that can be explained and all that. Talking about Elizabeth, she's known professionally as Beth Lee Crowder and a British pet psychic. She's done a lot of work on I've been on this morning with the various presenters, Channel 5. They call her the pet psychic, apparently. She's a smashing girl, and I've known her many years, and she's come to many of my shows, my mediumship shows over the years. She also writes books, one of them including Everything You Need to Know to Become a Pet Psychic. There's one for you then to look out for, isn't it? And that's going to, if you want to practice some of those things that we're discussing tonight, I'm sure that would be a very good book. And I'm sure you would like that. She's also a Reiki master, animal communicator with over 20 years experience. So she's been doing it for a long while. Radio house. Now, funny enough, she worked on Pulse Talk Radio with me. It was 5 years I was at Pulse Talk Radio. I don't know how many of those who follow my work, you used to tune into that and listen to the show every week. Unfortunately, we had to, the whole station's closed down with the unfortunate loss of the station manager and owner, Carl Wall. And yeah, she used to have a very popular show on there. We both did. I used to do a show on there, interviewing mostly famous guests and other people who had an interest in the spiritual world. Very popular. Carl used to tell me that some weeks, we got 30,000, 40, 50,000 listeners worldwide on the internet. So it was very popular. And as I say, Beth worked on there as well. And she would have had the same sort of things with her show. But I don't know. I haven't really seen enough evidence really for me to absolutely say, you know, it's a truth. But you would say, well, from your own experiences, you must believe, mustn't you? I don't know. I don't know. I think you always have to. I Before I class anything the paranormal, I always like to say if there's an explanation for the normal first, and I think that's good advice that I've always give out any, it would be paranormal investigators or ghost hunters and all that sort of thing. Try to look for the normal before you claim the paranormal, because that's the right way to go about research. But this dog that we've got now, a wonderful guy. He really is, I'll tell you. And a lot of people are not me. Well, I know now that I think that he has a lot of healing about him naturally, but they claim that they find him very healing. And more places that I go to do my work, they ask, "Oh, can you bring your lovely shepherd dog with you?" Because that's what he is, a shepherd dog. And can we have some healing from it? Well, why not? Why not? Why not, I say. But others also say that his eyes are very hypnotic, that he can almost hypnotize people. Now, again, those of you who have been following me for a good many years will know that I'm a properly trained hypnotherapist, and I've studied stage hypnosis as well, trained with Delavar. Gordon May, probably the greatest hypnotherapist of modern times, and also had a lot of training and advice with Jonathan Royale, who's a close friend of mine. But that might be something to talk about another day. My hypnotic dog. Can he hypnotise you? Well, I don't know. You'll have to invite us both to come along, maybe when we're giving a talk about something, and you can let him stare into your eyes. I've never actually heard him turn around and say, "Listen to me now, concentrate very carefully, listen to me." It'd be good if the dog could do that. But I try to look at things from both sides, but from my own life experiences, I have no doubt at all that animals such as dogs, have been so close to man through hundreds of years, probably thousands of years even, and I think they've absorbed some human energy the way we've probably learnt to attune with them. And I think, you know, psychic pets, I think I'd be inclined to give a yes to that, a truth to that. I would say to you, you need to investigate it and look into lots of different things yourself before. Don't just listen to what I've told you about tonight. Anything, whatever we teach you or speak about on this channel every Thursday night at 7 o'clock, come up with something different to chat to you about. And it's hard for me to be too coming down on a yes or a no for this one, because it's hard to say no to what you've experienced with your own senses and your own eyes, isn't it? But at the same time, my scientific mind would say, well, there's a lot of answers to scientists have proven that what's the real answer to it. But I think the thing to do is to say, I would have an open mind on this. And I'm sure you're going to have lots of stories that you're going to send me on Facebook now, or messages, and tell me about your experiences with your pets. Certainly, I know a lot of cat owners who have very unusual experiences, and they go right back. If you look at the ancient Egyptians, I wouldn't say that, well, maybe, I suppose they did worship cats to some extent. They thought that they were animals who could link to the afterlife and all those sort of things. Cats were the big one with those, weren't they? With the ancient Egyptians. And if you look through, I suppose, and study ancient history, you know, they say, that a dog is a man's best friend. It's probably true, isn't it? I say, well, a horse is a man's best friend as well, because I've had some reports of amazing interesting sort of things that you could look into and be open-minded about, because that's what I always do. And yeah, that's it. If you're interested in getting beside in a chat with Psychic Beth, or getting in touch, by the way, if you just type Elizabeth Beth Crowther into your Facebook or a search engine, you'll find the way that you can read about her and see the things that she does. If you're more interested in other things, then by all means do that. But I do think there's more to study about this pet psychic and animal communication work than meets the eye. And meets the eye. Much to understand. So as always, I'm going to wish you good night. God bless. Be good. If you can't be good, always do your very best to be careful. Good night. God bless one and all. And I'll see you once again in a week's time.